when you talk about art today or creative energy, walking, living, being creative. Again, for me, my expression, my experience is just that reconnection because it reconnects you to reality, actually, you know, reality on a primordial level, what nature is, what that essence of what it means to be human is, so those expressions. And I think part of the reason why it does that is because you have to be in the moment and it has to be you, you know? So those 2 points that are actually critical in art, I think that's the reason why it's so healing. And that's the reason why it becomes the form that people can go to get this experience, because you have to be you have to show up as yourself. There's just something about being in that space that even when it's tough, it's real. And that's joy. And you don't want anything else. The more you do it, the more it's like you're less willing to have make other compromises in terms of that. So that's why I think art, being creative and connecting to your creativity is really healing, you know? And it's just beauty, just also that concept of beauty is actually food.
Welcome to another episode of the Preparing for Pregnancy After Loss podcast. I have the pleasure of being here with one of my dear sisters, Abi. And people have probably heard about you at different times, but didn't know who I was talking about. So whenever I mention being in my sister squad or my peer support group or the group of women who get together weekly so that my being in this world is strengthened and supported, you are one of those women. And so, yeah, so grateful for your presence in my life. I'm grateful that you said yes to having this conversation be shared with anyone who might benefit from it. Welcome, Abi.
Thank you. Thank you. What can I say? I listened to your podcast, which is part of the reason why I couldn't say no, but I don't know if that will come up. So it's interesting to be on this side talking rather than listening.
Thank you. A friend of mine shared the other day that they were having a kaleidoscope of experiences and they could, point out each of the experiences. And I thought, wow, that's such an interesting way to describe the inner world. And so I'm curious if you were to describe yourself as a kaleidoscope of ways of being or expressions, what would that include?
I don't know. It's funny because I think one of the nice things our sister squad meetings have done is given me a different view of myself, because I have to say I don't really think so much about that, if that makes sense. So I'm often surprised when people are like, oh, this, that. I'm like, okay, I wouldn't really describe myself like this, but I suppose so. I'm always talking to myself. So this is what I'll say. I'm always talking to myself. My sister says, if you just see me, I'm smiling to myself. Like you can just see that I am in my own world, really like just getting into things at any moment. So that's how I'll say I'm just always observing, reflecting, just being tickled by things, what it reminds me of, So it's very much responding, if that makes sense, rather than analyzing, which is something I'd like to do more of, like take it to a next step of consciously, how can I use this even more in my life for myself, Yeah.
Yeah, and I've definitely benefited tremendously from your analysis, whether it's your own walk through life or watching a documentary or taking a course and sharing those insights. Something that I'm tuning into right now, and it's also something that I always observe during our calls and feel nourished by it. So I'm going to just name it because for those who are tuning into the audio version of this, they're not going to see what's happening. So one, there's this just like glowing smile on your face. That's one.
It's so funny because I never know I'm smiling. Like I could never tell when I'm smiling. So sometimes when people are like, oh, I'm smiling, and I'm like, am I really? Okay.
And two, it's all the beauty that you're surrounded by. So I'm seeing um, the greenery of a tree through the
Mhm.
window and how it's just like moving gently with the wind. I'm seeing like a floral that might be a curtain, a floral curtain, and
Mhm.
all the elements of nature, whether through, plants themselves or um, yeah, paintings and pictures. And a part of your expression in the world is being an artist. And so I'd love for
Yes.
you to share anything about that that's coming up for you.
Okay, so that's definitely one word. If, you know, I had to pick one word to describe myself, or the word that often comes up is artist, but I guess I often don't say it because then, so one of my secondary school classmates, we met decades later, and she's a doctor. And we're having this conversation because she's like, oh, you're so lucky. Every time you say what you do, it encourages conversation. Whereas I'm like, really? That's the exact reason why I don't like to say it. Because, of course, people are curious, like, what medium? Du-du-du, du-du. And it gets into this long conversation.
Mhm.
And often this happens when I'm away from my studio trying to not think about, that world. And she was like, for her as a doctor, nobody ever asked her. Like as soon as she says she's a doctor, it's like, oh, okay, you know. Whereas actually she does very many interesting and specific things. So it was just an interesting exchange. So I'm definitely an artist. I used to think the term visual artist was strange, but now I'm like, yeah, I think it makes sense. I don't know if that's only a UK, Ireland thing, but visual artist specifically to do with fine art, painting, sculpture, drawing
Mhm.
is my foundation. That's where I started.
Mhm.
Multidiscipline artist, which I don't like because I
Mhm.
think it doesn't make sense. Most artists use many different mediums.
Mhm.
So dance is also a big one, and textiles is. In terms of my work as an artist, or my being actually as an
Mhm.
artist, and specifically visual, for me, really using my eyes and arranging things is really important.
Mhm.
And so, the way I see it is like painting, which was my first art, if that makes sense, painting and drawing. It's like composing a picture. And I find that when I also live the world like that, it's more comfortable for me.
Mhm.
So when the season grabs me, like now that's coming more into summer, I'm about to do a rearrangement of my space, and I literally just, with my eyes, I don't need to call up the words, just really arranging the space to form a picture, an environment, and that's something that has been said about me quite a few times, like, oh, you're always painting pictures, like, even if I'm dressing, it's like, oh, it's telling, like, it's a landscape. It's
Mhm.
something about just creating a picture. So, that's very much part of my being and part of my expression, just this arranging and composing things
Mhm.
around me,
Mhm.
and just painting pictures, whether it's on paper, on canvas, on my
Mhm.
person, in my space.
Mhm.
And so, yes, I tend to even more so now be more animated, in terms of things around me. So I have at least 20 arrangements of all sorts of plants,
Mhm.
and things I like. And it is an arrangement, as in I
Mhm.
spend time just being in this space and moving things around.
Mhm.
So that's really important to me. And the funny thing about this visual aspect is that, oh, it's a funny one because, from a young age, I've always been like, when people are like, oh, I only believe what I see, you know? And I'm like, no, they don't, because people don't use their eyes. They don't, So, for example, somebody would be like, show me to do something. This is my favorite example, to draw, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
So we'll have the thing in front of us, whatever it is, and they're drawing. And I'm looking at them, and they're like, I can't draw, I can't draw. I'm looking down at the paper. They're not looking at the thing.
Mhm.
And I keep saying, look up, you're not looking at the thing. This is why you can't draw it. Before I knew more about teaching. So I'm very much guilty about this. Like I was not very sympathetic because I just keep saying, look up, just look at the thing. You're not looking at the thing. I just did other observations as well that people don't actually really use their eyes,
Mhm.
and being in fashion with textiles, like people try things on. And when they're looking in the mirror, they're not really looking at themselves. I call it checkboxing, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
Does this part look okay? Does my tummy look flat? does this look like what this person is wearing? But they're not actually using their eyes to look,
Mm-hmm.
at the whole impression. So this is a big part of my artistry and this visual expression. But for me, I would say maybe it's more about color and
Mm-hmm.
form, let's say, rather than words. And I
Mm-hmm.
use words better now that I think of it more like paintings, rather
Mm-hmm.
than, where I used to think about words, which is more planning, shall I say, saying things concretely, but when I think of it more as atmosphere, painting a
Mm-hmm.
picture,
Mm-hmm.
it comes easier. So that is a big part of my expression.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Could you share some of the work that you've done? Um, I assume that it's been in the UK, but maybe it's been other places, but definitely in the UK. Yeah, I'd love for you to share that.
Let me see. So this one is an interesting one, because over the last year, I've definitely been working on my language around my work,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna speak, but it might change if you hear me talk about it a year later.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm holding, especially the last few years, is a type of something I want to do that's not coming out the way I want to. So I keep having these series of projects,
Mm-hmm.
which really is around performance and dance, which are not, I'm, I don't know the word to use, which didn't turn out how I wanted them to turn out, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've been sitting with that because out of all my art forms, that is the one movement dance is the one where I keep saying it's my most difficult. It's my most difficult medium. So that's why it's holding a lot of space in my art right
Mm-hmm.
now. So for example, I did a project here in Ireland. Um, and the whole idea of it, I'm very inspired by masquerade, West African masquerade in particular. So I was this masked character, which I call Bag Lady, and she was showing up in public spaces in different parts of the town, Port.
Mm-hmm.
So the first part of the performance was me as myself in that space making my costume. So I had my sewing machine out, I'd be there sewing, whatever. And the spaces were like square shopping centers, so people are
Wow.
seeing me. Then at a specific point, I'll put all the costume together, which is made of bags,
Wow.
and I have masks, so which is a clay mask, which is an impression of my face, but it's a very simple clay terracotta mark
Mm-hmm.
that mask that gives a specific impression.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, I'd get dressed and all these things I'd be making. Then at a specific time, I'd have this dance performance. And the dance performance is in specific parts. And the last part is then taking apart the costume, which is bags, and giving it to people. So the audience who'd be walking, but just walking through the town, like really giving it all away until it's all gone. And then that's the end of
Wow.
the performance. So this bag lady is a character that's come up since I was at university. I think maybe that was even my first performance. And each time it's not it yet, so
Mm.
every once in a while, every few years she comes up. So she's coming up now. So that's very much why she's on my mind. And also because I had this experience, because I've done this performance twice in Ireland. So one was when I was on a residency in Limerick, which is on the west of Ireland, at the dance company. And I did it for one of their performance evenings. And I met a lady last year. So this is 2007, I believe.
Mhm.
And I met a lady last year at some gathering, and she was like, she still has that bag, which I was like, interesting. And she was like, oh, I wonder what different people did with the bag. And I remember even when I was in Limerick after the performance, like maybe a
Mhm.
few months later, I was there for a year. I would see someone walking down the street with one of my bags. Yeah, so it was quite like, oh, and so just seeing it, I was like, really? That's like what? Is it almost 20 years ago? And she's like, yeah,
Wow.
she still has it. It's very handy, it's very useful. So I was like, okay. Um, so that's one of the performances. And definitely with dance, when it shows up, it's around characters.
Mhm.
And this Bag Lady character also is very much inspired by Erykah Badu's Bag Lady song. So it's very
Mhm.
much about that weight, about that,
Mhm.
struggle, about letting
Wow.
go, etc. So why she came up is because I'm revisiting her again, now with
Wow.
insight, seeing, okay, how can this happen? I also made a short film which played at the British Film Institute a long while ago, but it's one of the ones that actually I'm happy with. That's one of my few works that I'm happy with, and that I'm like, it is it, you know? It's what it's meant to be. And that also is a mass character, but slash documentary. It's called Exile. So just drawing on this idea of yeah, being an immigrant, this generation, being an African woman, growing up in Ireland, the UK, and then going back. And the first experiences, because even as a Nigerian woman, an African woman, I'm from the city, you know. And so the first experiences were very much this urban experience. After I finished university, I applied for some grants. Expedition grant and other grants to travel in more remote parts of West Africa. And this was specifically to see this festival that nomads in the desert do. It's called the Cure Sale, the Salt Cure. And so they all meet in this part of the desert, and it's days of dancing and singing. And they also have
Wow.
this beauty contest, which is a beauty contest for the men, you know, so they dress up, you know, do all their dancing, you know, and the women get to admire and pick who they like, you know. Um, and so the documentary was going through to this festival, but we did a route, you know, in very remote parts. And so, yeah, it was just that musing of a sort of longing for something you don't know or being associated with something actually you don't know, you know. That's a part of African life that I personally have never experienced, even though I took part and was able to connect, but it's not my story, you know, it was not my environment. So that was another film. Around me, we're not on video, you can see many of my drawings. So that is my baby, not my baby, my breath. Like I could draw from the minute I picked up a pencil.
Wow.
And it's just what I can just do that. Do you know what I mean? As in that's the one where it's my easiest, it's
Mm-hmm.
my easiest art, which sometimes means I don't take it as seriously as some of the other ones, if that makes sense. But that was the first thing. I remember going for a drawing class and I could just draw. And then remembering as a child, I would do, I don't know if I've shared this with you before, probably, but I would do all these drawings of Rapunzel. And the funny thing, because that has come up again recently, is that it was something about the story that you know, this image of tower and hair down the tower was very specific. So I keep drawing it over and over again, you know. And the moment somebody, a classmate, was like, "Oh, would you draw one for me?" I froze, you know, because it just became different once I was doing it at request, you know, rather than making an artwork coming from inward out. But why Rapunzel came up is because I always say Rapunzel is my favorite storyteller. But it's because it sparked an image in me, but I don't know the story. So every once in a while, I'm like, let me find out what the story of Rapunzel is again. You know, like I hold on to the image or the portal it opened in me, but what the story is, I don't know, you know, and all the things around that. So yeah, drawing and then textiles, embroidery, even though my textiles comes from a deviation, what I thought was a deviation from the art world and the fashion world for practical reasons, money, you know, and it just seemed easier. Um, but actually textiles is one of my mediums, and now that it's back within my art practice, it makes sense, more sense than within a commercial one, even though I really enjoyed that time. I really enjoyed that time. And that'll be embroidery and just dyeing fabrics. Like I did a project now. I have a lot of plants around me because I use that to do fabric. And then I
Oh
spend the
my
last
gosh.
few
I see the
weeks
delight on your face as you're talking about
embroidery.
the
I
dyeing.
do. I do. I'm a nature baby, which I always laugh because I'm such an urban person. It took me a while to be able to say it because I'm like, then you see me in the bush, like, is that a fly? You know, just being really, but I am a nature baby, you know. I am an urban nature baby. So I love being in the forest or well, our forests, you know, and just
Mhm.
being around plants and having them around me. Yeah.
Mhm. I'm thinking of the image of you. I don't know, maybe it's packing a bag or packing a basket and, heading out to the forest or the garden and
Mhm.
spending the day there doing art. And yeah, that just sounds so delightful.
As I say, when I go out, I pack my luggage. You think I'm going on a weekend break. Like I have my little pulley thing with all the things I need. Like I'm just like anytime. I feel like I amuse my neighbors, when I go out into the park. I also spend a lot of time in my garden, but when I go out into the park, because I'm just there, I'm there like picking things, doing it. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? But in a nice way and getting lots of smiles, like, what is this person doing? What is she
Hmm.
doing?
So wow, there's so many questions or so many pathways that we could go into based on what you shared. Um, One is appreciating the ways that art can support us in expressing something that lives deep within us or something that just needs more attention. So when you mentioned the Bag Lady project, I thought of Erica's Bag Lady songs. I'm so glad to hear that that was the inspiration. And yeah, this idea of weight and weightlessness, weight and then releasing the weight. And there's a way that so the song is on one level, and for the visual expression through people both seeing it and the dance, that's a whole other level. For someone to have a bag with them to take that from the experience, that's also another level of, embodiment or really receiving that. So I just appreciate art in general and the gift that that is to us as humanity. Like, wow. Um, the other thing that's coming to mind is something that, I know you've shared in previous conversations that we've had. And it's this link or this separation, maybe even between art as it's expressed in the commercial world, such as within the fashion industry, or art as it's expressed in, dancing school or dancing ballet, and perhaps the innate way as humans that we want to express it, but
Mm,
how, there is the way that it brings harm when it's capitalized on, right? And I've heard you share the ways that you've either stepped out of that or you've held a new framing that has liberated yourself. And so I'd love for you to share whatever is coming up for you from that.
yeah, that's an interesting one. Um, Because as sad as it is, well, first of all, I'll share my university experience. So I studied fine art in London, and it was just a nightmarish experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, like, before, secondary school was also a different nightmarish. It wasn't a nightmarish experience. It was a disconnected experience. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not one, I like being responsible for myself, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So just being a child and having other people
Mm-hmm.
planning your agenda, planning what you're going to eat, like that was a real, like at 16, I remember one day I just broke down in tears. Like I just was like, by the whole thing. So for me, there was definitely that countdown, to being an adult, to going to university, being around artists, doing what I want to do. So I definitely had that anticipation. And so then going into an experience, specifically because it was art with other artists, this course was an artist course, as in it was studio based. Um, just having that really horrible experience was really traumatic, which is why then afterwards I was then looking into fashion because I was really like, I can't be in this world, the art world, because it was just so horrible. For me personally, a lot of bullying, a lot of putting down, like my very first day. Um, in my specific department, we had sort of like, so we're a very small school. So in the department I ended up in, which was maybe part of the problem because I got into the painting department. And because I was a foreign student coming from Ireland, and we got to be in, it's called Fresh, no, it's not Freshers Week. I can't remember, but you get to come in a week before just to kind of see where everything is, et cetera, before home students, so to speak. And Me and another girl, Emily, who's American, we were the two foreigners, so we were there a week beforehand, and we went into the painting department, and the painting professor or whatever was like, I don't really know what else you want to do but paint, like here's your space. Get started. Like the concept of what else would an artist want to do but paint? Whereas what we want to do is like walk around London,
Mm,
be told the cool places, all these things. I was like, no, just start painting. And then I asked a question like, oh, supposing I want to do some photography. And he looked at me and he was like, you're not a painter. And he sent me down to the sculpture department, because he's like, painters don't want to do anything but paint. So, so he sent me down to the sculpture department. And it's funny because I think for the first year or for a long time, I was painting down in sculpture before I veered out to other things. And
mm,
but it was in a nice way. I didn't mind. But the sculpture department was definitely a horrible place.
mm,
We were small. So I'd say in the whole department, that's undergraduate and postgrad, it could have been 20 people. So it
mm,
was really small. And the head of sculpture I don't know what she took to me, but I was a target, which meant that all the other students also didn't talk to me. So for our
mm,
first meeting, when everyone came together, it was like, okay, bring one or two works so
mm,
that we can show each other. I mean, that's how you talk as artists. I show you my work, you show me your work.
mm,
And even as I brought out my paintings, she was just like, why are you signing your work? Who do you think you are? I didn't even get to talk about my work, but she just set the tone like that.
mm,
Nobody talked about my work. It was just like, oh, who do you think you are? And everyone chimed in on that. Why would you sign your work? I mean, you must be so arrogant. Why are
mm,
you even here? Like, are you just doing it because you have to? You don't really seem like you're an artist, which is, something that, of course, happens very much
mm,
in this art world with Black people,
mm,
especially, or non-white people,
mm,
non-white males. It's like, you're not really an artist. You must be like, I don't know, craftsperson, even though I don't find that to be an insult, but it's meant to be, you
mm,
know. And so even from that moment, she set the tone, whenever I would give feedback on work, people would literally be like looking elsewhere. She'd be talking to someone else. And in such a small group where
mm,
you're 5, 6, of course. And I'm the only one that's done for. Anytime a visiting professor would come, she would talk to them beforehand to say that I'm a difficult person, I'm very
wow,
arrogant. And I didn't know this was happening until another lecturer told me on the quiet. But again, because she was the head of the department, it was very much everybody went along with her.
wow.
Um, so it was a really nightmarish experience. And,
Mm,
it's just lots of things about how certain people are. Because
mm,
like I think 10 years later, there was a lady who was beside me. I mean, also I was the youngest person in the department.
mm,
So I came in at 18.
mm,
Even 4 years later, I was still the youngest person in the department. Most people
mm,
came in as a second degree or later in life.
mm,
So they were in their 20s, 40s, 50s.
mm.
So even looking back on it, I'm so disgusted as an adult. Like, how can you treat an 18-year-old person like that?
Yeah.
You know, an 18-year-old child,
Mm,
like it's just the whole thing is just so disgusting on every level.
mm,
Anyway, so this woman who was like 50 years old, she had a granddaughter when we were there. 10 years later, and she was like the sidekick to this woman. 10 years later, even though I taught her how to sew, which is a funny thing, like I taught her how to use a sewing machine, which became part of her practice.
mhm,
Um, 10 years later, she was like to someone like, oh yeah, I don't know how I even stuck it because it was such a horrible atmosphere for me, everyone just ganging up on me, etc.
mm,
And I remember when this person came to tell me, this is like, some people are interesting, like they came to tell me almost like, we are sorry we did not stand up for you.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? It wasn't even really oh, this happened to you. I'm sorry, I didn't say anything. It was more like like exonerate me. I
mm,
know I did something wrong. So I'm
mm,
saying it now so that you can tell me it was okay. Whereas I'm not like that. You know me well enough now. I'm not like that. I was just like, look, you made your choice.
mm,
That's how you chose to act. So I don't really know what you want from me or why
mm,
but you made your choice. You made the decision.
mhm,
It's yours. It has nothing to do with me.
mm,
Um, and so from a visual arts point of view, that's where I got that specifically. And
mm,
this is a very good art college. And just in general, like people, do this thing. I'm in Europe, and they'll do this thing where if I say I'm an artist, they'll say, no, 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 you're not, you
Mm.
know? Without looking at my CV, without looking at my work, but just always that thing of as soon as they see who you are, it's like you don't look like an artist. And they would even continue by saying something like, no, artist, it's a really high word. It's a really, high concept. Not even hearing themselves. Do you see what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you say to them, no, you're not that, because basically, how can you be such a,
Mhm.
everybody just thinks they're an artist, but no, it's a high concept, it's a this, that.
Mhm.
So that's the art world. In dance, it's definitely physical,
Mhm.
and first of all, in terms of age, because I started doing dance classes seriously or properly at university at the old age of 18. It always makes me laugh, but for dance, it's like, old, you know? And so that one, because it's very physical, in that, first of all, you don't look this way you should look. You don't
Mhm.
have the physique, you're not the age, and
Mhm.
I just found it interesting that with a lot of dance classes, it's like just teach the dance, or a lot of dance classes, I should say specifically, like ballet, certain
Mhm.
contemporary styles. It feels like 80-90% of the class could be telling you why you can never be good,
Mhm.
rather than just teaching and
Right.
just letting what happens happens. Like there seems to be a more active
Mhm.
energy in
Mhm.
gatekeeping. Like, oh no, you can't do it. You don't have the right body. You started
Mhm.
too young, so your body has already shaped itself. You won't be able to do this. Or, even again, the thing about race, like, oh, this type of African dancing, ooh, like, it's not really
Mhm.
refined, or even in terms of being an artist, because I'm an artist, visual art background. It becomes like, oh yeah, you're okay for a visual artist, but it's not really dance. So I
Mhm.
found in that specific space, there is a lot more vocalization
Mhm.
around the body, a lot more gatekeeping,
Wow.
a lot more you can't.
Mhm.
Because in the visual arts world, I should say this, it was our college, and it was specifically around that teacher.
Mhm.
I had moments with individuals, like when we got a new head who was an Irishman, and my background is in Ireland, and I feel Irish people can be just more easygoing about these things, or
Mhm.
they have a different understanding than maybe other people. And I remember they were starting their bullying thing, and he was like, "No, I know Abby. I've known her for 4 years. Like, no,
Mhm.
she knows what she's doing." And so I had someone, because he was the head, who
Mhm.
actually stood up for me and really was like, "No, no, we're not getting there." Like
Right.
I mean, just so many things.
Mhm.
Um, so that experience was specifically art college.
Mhm.
As I said, I took a break immediately after. No. But then after a few years, I was really missing art and feeling like I was dying. I really mean it. Like I feel like my
Mhm.
words were slurring. I was not able to move. I was
Mhm.
working a regular job at some office, 9 to 5, and so I was like, okay, I need to do this thing.
Yeah.
At this stage, I was in Ireland, so I went to Visual Artists Ireland, which is the professional body, I suppose.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, yeah, let me join, and then they were doing some workshops, i.e., just how to make money as artists, basically, or how to arrange your practice. And I remember the first one I went to, like, there were maybe 15, 20 of us around the table, and it was like the usual, each person just say something, why are you here, or, about your practice or whatever. And I remember I was like, yeah, I haven't, I graduated from college maybe 5 years ago, and it was such a horrible experience that I haven't done anything, but now I feel like I need to be there. And just the sea of understanding, I just remember
Mhm.
that so well, like everybody knew what I was talking about.
Mhm.
And it just opened up that conversation. So for me, that was so healing, and also scary to see that a lot of artists who go to art college go
Mhm.
through this,
Mhm.
and find like this is a very usual experience,
Mhm.
actually. And so I'll say outside college for visual arts, I don't find that funniness with artists or with
Mhm.
curators anymore. But dance, as I said, with dance classes, the funniness is still there.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, yeah. So those definitely have had shaping elements, and I think a lot of the shaping elements they've had
Mhm.
is more along the lines of living in certain concepts or paths and being like, no, it's not for me and it's not true.
Mhm.
And just coming to a place where it's like, not only is it not true for me, it's just not true,
Right.
you know? And just really seeing how a lot of this gatekeeping, people who spend a lot of time telling you you can't do this or that,
Mhm.
all this, like, to me, it's a red flag to run, that these are not strong people, they're not real teachers,
Yeah.
you know, and all that actually is a weakness, even though it's strength because it's oppressing you and
Mhm.
because it's having an impact on you. But actually, for that individual, it's a deep sign of weakness. There's nothing to be impressed about. There's nothing to go back and try and change that person's mind, or try to impress them or get in their energy. It's like, no, for me now, it's a run. Like, life is too short.
Yeah.
I'm not dealing with that.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. And like the trauma
Hmm.
that one can go through at 18, being in an environment that, people mostly look different from you, and being
Hmm.
the youngest, like, wow, like the opposite could have been people just taking you into the fold and guiding you and
Hmm.
supporting you and mentoring you and ensuring that you have everything that you need. But instead, it was attack after attack.
Hmm. Hmm. I definitely had a moment in my life where it switched from, I would say, having bad teachers or not real teachers,
Hmm.
to having real teachers. So I feel like the first 20, 30 years of my life was like that. But then I had a switch, and I think also, anyway, who knows all the different reasons, but once you have a good teacher, you know what to look for. And once I have those series of bad teachers, like, I also know language and things that from the start, I'm like, nah, I
Yeah.
don't even need to waste. I don't need to be polite. I'm out, even if I paid for a class. Like, because the damage of hearing those words or being in that energy is far worse than whatever you may have paid
Yeah.
to do that workshop, But I started having what I'll call real teachers, because you're always learning.
Hmm.
I think in life anyway, but certainly as an artist. So when I do different courses now, I seem to have real teachers. Um,
Hmm.
and the teacher wants to teach. Do you
Hmm.
know what I mean? They
Hmm.
want to teach. So anybody who's spending time telling you what you can't or can't do, as far as I'm concerned, is not a real teacher.
Yeah.
Who's busy telling you the right or wrong way, especially in creative
Mhm.
fields. Because what I've noticed about teachers now is like it's your voice. There's no right or wrong way. Just try.
Express
This tends to
yourself.
be just jump, just do it. Like you learn something. No, like it's not restrictive. Or like
Yeah.
no, like it's expansive.
Yeah.
And they get excited for you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for letting us see into what that experience was like for you. And I'm so grateful that you're on the other side of this, expressing yourself as yourself.
And being surrounded by other professionals in this world, art world, that actually also
Mhm.
feel the same way,
Yeah.
you know? Um, because when I first started saying my strong no's and it was on energy or things that other people would be like, you're not serious, you have no money and you're saying no to this because this person
Mhm.
said what,
Yeah.
It just opened another door, you know?
Mhm.
Working with better people, respectful people, people who
Mhm.
want to pay and pay you
Mhm.
well, and who respect your time and what you're doing, who say thank you rather
Mhm.
than I'm doing you a favor. That kind of way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you share more about that? What led to that shift for you, to you beginning to say your strong no's?
Ah, it's definitely a gradual thing. So it wasn't just an overnight.
Mhm.
I remember the first step that I am conscious of is listening to this time I was in fashion. Because even then I was still freelance. I just like organizing my time. I do. I do.
Mhm.
And so there was a lady I was doing a course, online course, and she was like, she had to start raising her prices because she started having evil thoughts about people, like anytime it's like she's doing the work and it's like so and so, da, da. So she was like, so she had to raise her prices because she was like just projecting. So that was what first touched me because I was like, it's
Mhm.
so true.
Mhm.
At a certain point, when you're not paid well, when you're doing the work, it just sucks the joy out of it, and your thought forms, it may not be as extreme, as that, but still,
Mhm.
So that was the first point where I was like, she's so right. Like your mindset just starts changing and the dialogue you're having about those people also
Mm-hmm.
starts changing. And I remember then I was like asked to quote for work. So what I did was I did three quotes because I was just not bold enough to say what I really wanted. So the middle one was what I really wanted. And I
Mm-hmm.
did a slightly lower one and a slightly higher one, obviously with different offerings. And I was so shocked when the lady took the most expensive one, and she thanked me from day one till months after, you know? So for me, I was like, she's not knowing that I'm quaking in my boots, to say this price. And the one that I thought was really like, was
Mm-hmm.
the one she just picked. And so from there, it just kept getting more and more. So first of all, this price increases, and then also just like if I don't like someone,
Mm-hmm.
so if I talk to you and I'm just not liking you, understanding that that always isn't, because before I'd see it as oh, you're judging people, whereas I'm like, it's an environment, it's a warning. I don't know that person, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but this not liking feeling actually is more like a don't go there. You
Mm-hmm.
don't know that person, and just distancing myself from that, then I just follow it.
Yeah.
I don't need
Information from your
to,
body.
yeah, just like, and the other biggest prompt was I felt very sick. So that's actually the biggest, what made me really jump and
Mm-hmm.
be really even more so. So I felt very ill, and one of the symptoms was just energy. So I was literally bedridden for years.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, like even listening to the radio, I would need to rest. Like I couldn't read, I couldn't listen, like everything was energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those years, like even listening to like everything was so much energy in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was also so unpredictable, my energy levels, like I might have, it was usually 5 minutes, but I don't know when that 5 minutes is going to come. And I don't know if that 5 minutes will be 30 seconds or 1 minute or maybe even 15 minutes. So things became precious. So it became like if someone was talking to me and I'm having this energy, I would literally drop the phone
Mm-hmm.
for a few reasons, because I had people in my life where I'm like, if I start explaining, it would just get longer. But I have 5 minutes today, that kind of way. Like, this might be the only 5 minutes I have. I can't, so having that urgency because it was a physical, like, if I don't, I was a lot harsher, as in I would literally just drop the phone.
Mm-hmm.
I would literally just, and it wasn't with any bitterness, it was just more of that preciousness of
Mm-hmm.
energy
Wow.
and so what I noticed, because it was a really long time that I did this,
Mm-hmm.
and just letting people down, not following up on things, even though eventually I just stopped even saying yes to anything because I was like, I don't know if I'll be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
After 2 or 3 years, here's what I noticed, that nobody noticed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was shocking. In my eyes, the things I did was like just shockingly irresponsible or rude or, those people didn't notice.
Mm-hmm.
So even when I got better and they would be like, oh, you know what happened? You could tell, but they just didn't remember,
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I stuck with it, because number one, I'm like, they don't even notice. It looks like I'm the one who's spending all this energy.
Mm-hmm.
Even though when you're well, it doesn't feel like energy, but it actually is. So
Right.
like what I put it as is before I was ill, I was working on the definite no's. So things that don't feel comfortable, that don't feel good, that
Right.
don't actually really make sense. I don't have to act desperately like, oh, just in case, yes, it's sounding like a terrible deal, but maybe, something magical will happen in like just those ones, cutting them out.
Mm-hmm.
But what illness did for me was the okays, the things that were okay. Do you know what I mean? I was like, life is just too short for okay, because there are many
Oh,
yeses
oh,
and things. So there is no
yeah.
need to spend any time in that, because just having that limit of time for so many years and
Yeah.
having a pile up of things that I absolutely definitely want to do, I
Wow.
didn't have time for the mediocres, the
Oh.
okays. I don't mind. Mm-mm. So that went on the list. And so even in terms of working with people, it's like we have to have a good rapport. It can't be just a okay, I don't mind. It has to be I'm excited, you're excited.
Mm-hmm.
This is gonna work out. Do you know what I mean? As in the highest possible energy and complementary thing. So that was really scary because, as I mentioned, I was very ill for very many years. So when I was getting back to work, the first thing I started was all my art projects.
Mm-hmm.
Life is too short, so all my fantasy projects. So rather than the build up to get somewhere, it's more like I
Mhm.
don't have time. I'll just start at the projects I really want to do, you know.
Mhm.
And just things like arranging my studio space, like just focusing on other things because,
Mhm.
just that perspective of preciousness of time, for me, it edited things differently. So when it came to working with people, that was a nervous fit because it's hard to say no when you have no money, this kind of way. But it worked really well. And one of the projects I was invited on, the man leading it, he had so I was invited by another organization, another arts organization. It was a grief cafe. And what he said was, oh, he just wants to meet with me. It was online. Just meet, as in let's just chat, let's vibe, let's talk, let's see
Mhm.
how, and afterwards he was like, he does that like aside from the interview because he just wants to make sure that the energy. So we had a really good long talk, and he was very like that, very
Mhm.
what's the energy like, spending time before committing. Do you know what
Mhm.
I mean? To really make sure that the synergy, everything is working well. So even with this project, we had a 6 month period
Mhm.
before even expected to do any work, this kind of way. So that was really funny. So
Yeah.
being on that project and seeing somebody who's confident in doing that, and how well it worked.
Yeah.
Like it was just such an enjoyable project and
Yeah.
it led to so many other spin-offs. It also helped me even be more confident that it's not even only about the first vibe, it's actually even taking time, like before we work together, let's know each other, like I really will do what I need to do to
Mhm.
feel this is a good idea.
Yeah.
Because from my previous experience, you really can trauma, getting damaged, talking to teachers who might be somebody or who might lead you to some,
Mhm.
even though it doesn't seem like anything, but it really attaches to your sense of self. Because I feel like people say I'm a confident person, but I think it's more like I'm in my own world. So I'm very good at, you know, separating in a way, but it still affected me. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it still had an impact on the story I tell myself
Right.
about myself as an artist, about what possibilities I have in the world, Um, so yeah, so this has been a critical thing where now when people are like, oh, you have such nice jobs, you have such, I'm like, I have to say no, it wasn't easy, like it was a big jump, you know, like it
Mhm.
was a big, that editing and saying no, unless it's not even only just okay, but
Mhm.
really feels good. And one of the deepest logical things is because you spend so much time vetting people and they spend so much time vetting you.
Mhm.
Yeah. It means it's a relationship. You're not just going to do that for one day's work.
Right.
We're going to do that for continued work, which is
Mhm.
what has happened, that we moved to different projects. This project has ended. So it then builds those
Mhm.
long-term relationships,
Mhm.
um, work relationships, also relationships. Yeah.
Mhm.
So now I'm just like, oh, it would have been interesting if I've done this sooner. But for me, life is about experiences. So no regrets,
Mhm.
because I think spending so much time in that space means that there's no temptation. And
Mhm.
whenever people try and tell me things, I'm like, I've been there. So you're telling me a world I've walked in. I've been there. I know exactly what you're talking about. No.
Yeah.
And just noticing also now in my mid 40s, people I graduated with, because the
Mhm.
university had, lawyers, that it was all, well, okay, in the UK, there were other departments, people who go off and do their,
Mhm.
doctors, what do they call these people, finance people, etc. And just saying that I think it was about 15 years ago where I noticed I am the happiest. All these people are jealous of me. Seriously. And I'm here like on their couch. Literally. Like I have nowhere to live. My landlord is bullying me. How am I gonna, going to like clean apartments at night, or work. But they were all jealous of me.
Mhm.
Like I was the one with the most stories. I'm the one who's always meeting people, always having interesting experiences, always traveling. So that
Mhm.
was also a real eye-opener where I was like,
Mhm.
I've been there, done that. I know people who do these things, and for a long time, I've been the happiest,
Mhm.
most interesting life. So there's no temptation.
I'm curious, how are ways that they either describe or criticize your way of being?
Okay, so I should also mention that one thing I also did for myself, especially during the illness period, was
Mhm.
like I just cut off more or less all of those people.
Mm,
Because I was like, no, like I don't want to hold space for certain energies. I
mhm,
empathize. I
mm,
wish you well, but not in my garden, find someone
mhm,
else. And make more space for like the way I see it is it's all about the ideal, the dreamers. These are the people who I want around me where
mm.
working together, we're encouraging each other
Yeah.
rather than the other way around where you get to dump your disappointment or your
Mm,
funny energies and I'm meant to hold it.
mm.
Um, I love holding space, but for me, I just think there's something fundamentally wrong in disrespecting someone and then having an expectation that they hold space for you.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Mm,
So what were some of the ways? Yeah, so I got this thing where people will always be like, oh, you're such a student, you still live a student life. You just don't care about things like having a car or being comfortable. That was one really drove me crazy,
oh my
or
God.
that sort of thing, like,
Mm.
oh, you're an artist, aren't you? Like, she's the creative, like, just really weird. Like, somebody, I remember this lady was like, she just doesn't even wear black shoes. These creative people. Or somebody I remember recently came into an a space, she was invited in, and she's like, oh, I can just see you're all artists, so weirdly dressed. So things that people think it's okay to say, like, you don't have feelings. Like, oh, we so weirdly dressed, or look at you, you just don't care about these things. And it's
Oh
like,
my gosh.
who doesn't like to be treated nicely? Do you know what I mean? Oh yeah, so these were the interesting ways,
Mhm.
or even chats like, oh, I'm
Mm,
calling you just to let you know that this life you're leading, you're gonna regret it, this kind of
mm,
way, like you need to settle down,
mm.
i.e. buy a house, get a real job. That was also quite a popular one. Oh, she's unemployed. Or describing my job as something else. Oh, she's a teacher. I'm like, really? Am I? And the way people did it was like, oh, I'm trying to big you up.
Mm.
Like, oh, I want people to think well of you. So you're telling them what I don't do, as in
Mm.
you don't see the huge insult in that. So I'm
Wow.
glad to say that that lot I've left behind a long
Mm.
time ago in that.
Mm.
I make no effort.
Yeah.
It's literally like if we're walking on the street, I will say hi and keep
Yeah.
walking. It is a warm one, but I'm like, I'm not
Yeah.
having that energy anymore.
It's like I'm so tickled by it. Obviously, your experience receiving it is different, but
Mm,
my experience of knowing the work that you do and how fulfilling
mm,
it is, knowing how happy you are,
yeah.
the lightness with which you move through life when those, people aren't bothering you. It's like, oh my gosh, if only they could taste a little bit.
They know it. And that's why because even as I say it, I mean, it's just the audacity. But
Mhm.
in the moment, which is why I'm like, I'm consciously not holding space for them. But in the
Yeah.
moment, I can see a lot of tenderness on their
Mhm.
side in
Mm.
terms of disappointment at what they thought their lives would be.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. So in the moment, the reason why I had time for it or space for it is because I really felt a vulnerability and I
Mhm.
really felt, you know,
Mhm.
do you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
intent or the energy behind that words,
Mhm.
which most of the time, one or two were just mean or just, weird. But for
Right.
most of them, it held on their side a disappointment, which is what
Mhm.
I felt when they were talking. Like, they're
Mhm.
not happy.
Mhm.
They're not happy. And how sad it is that you pick who you think is the most vulnerable to
Mhm.
take that out on,
Yeah.
like there's also something a bit very sad
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
So in the moment, I rarely felt like I didn't rise or I didn't feel like often saw the humor, but
Mhm.
also just that these are really sad people,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I mean sad
Right.
rather than pathetic, like just more like, wow, they're holding a lot of sadness.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That actually brings me back to the head of the department in the
Yeah.
college that you were going to. It's making me think of something a friend of mine shared, that when people are looking to dominate or to entrap or to enslave, to capture others, it's because that is their inner world,
Mm,
right? And so in feeling, you know, dominated, these probably aren't the right words, but in feeling this sense of being trapped themselves, or in feeling this sense of not being free, then
Mm-hmm.
they push that onto someone else to liberate themselves. And that is not liberation. It's
Mm-hmm.
continuing the harm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This
Yeah.
is why I'm just like it often, I think always is like really deep, that's a wound or weakness or something on that person's side.
Uh-huh.
But I am now learning because before when I feel someone's sadness, I have time for do you know what I mean? I just have that wanting to hold space for them, you know? Because I did also notice that there is also something that they found, what's the word? Comforting about me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I suppose
Mm-hmm.
also because they didn't need to impress me. In general, you just don't, you know, so I know that they were able to be themselves in a certain way,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
so I was often invited to things.
Mm-hmm.
They're oft like I remember this lady even invited me, asked me to be her chief bridesmaid or something, which I was still in shock about to this day. But just seeing that there was something they got from my energy or my space. So as you're insulting someone, enjoy. I don't believe in that, you know, I'm just like, so at that moment, I was able to hold space because I was like, it's coming from pain and I can see they're gaining something.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, relationships are two people,
Yeah.
not just one. It's like until you can
Mm-hmm.
say thank you or until
Mm-hmm.
you can talk to me
Mm-hmm.
in a respectful way.
Mm-hmm.
But most importantly, until we have common ground that we're building something together.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I wish you well, but not my space, you know? Yeah, not my space, not my time.
Yeah. A project that I've been dreaming into working on is around the walk of liberation that
Mm,
we take in our lives. Um, and it definitely feels like a walk of liberation to hear you share about working in, it might have been like an admin kind of role, like you mentioned an office job, 9 to 5, and feeling the depth within you as you are
mm-hmm,
experiencing this expression of art that is so your nature. And
mm-hmm,
then choosing to re-enter the art world, getting the support, being in that group, feeling the yeah, the level of community companionship and co-holding as
mm-hmm.
you're in that space, and moving more and more towards who you are, which for me, like, that is the expression of liberation, like walking this earth, being your
Mm-hmm.
innate self. And it has to take a lot of courage, because there is so much that tries to squeeze us in boxes and
Yeah,
have us do, whether it's the 9 to 5 or the Monday to Friday or the office job, and
yeah,
get the house and get the car, and this is the model for living, and if you're not doing that, then you're not showing up to life. And to choose to follow what's calling you, like, oh my gosh.
yeah. I was gonna say it's so funny because I have to say I can understand why the word courage is used, but in my case, like just so many
Mhm.
outside forces
Mhm.
made it so, you know.
Mhm.
So for example, when I was like, I'm an artist,
Mhm.
and when I'm not being an artist, like I'm dying, you know, as in
Mhm.
you know, so even simple things like people being like, oh, a monthly paycheck. After I had a monthly paycheck for a while, I remember one of the things I said is, I don't mind not having a monthly paycheck, as in actually that does not add to my life
Mhm.
significantly,
Mhm.
knowing definitely how much, you know, I'm going to earn and when it's coming.
Yeah.
And once I accepted that, I even then found other courses and other ways of organizing your finance. So it's not the extreme opposite because
Mhm.
that's what's given to you. That is either you know what you're getting every month in your monthly paycheck, or you don't know, you know, maybe not. Like it definitely is not that random. I know how much I'm going to get, but it's not in that
Mhm.
you know, way that
Mhm.
monthly paychecks are. So that was one of the big liberation things for me. But for me, it was definitely experiences or
Mhm.
situations. So the fact that I'm an artist means that a lot of things are worse. So for me, yes, it'd be nice to have, you know, whatever, but compared to not spending all my time on my artwork, there's no comparison for me.
Mm,
So for me, it's actually quite literal in that I have something that I physically definitely prefer to do, you
mhm,
know? So it's not just there. It's like, what's the alternative? And for me, yeah, I would rather like, live in not the best part of town, in a
mhm.
smaller place, and be able to do my artwork, which was
Yeah,
a choice for half the day, like just work for
yeah.
extra income at the time for 2 days of the week, than get a full-time job. So for me, it was an actual life is not worth living if I'm not doing this.
Mhm,
And then the second thing was just in terms of illness, where then I have for many years had a severe direct impact on my time, my
mhm,
resources, how much time I can dedicate to something, brain space, etc., which meant I can't take on any and everything.
mhm,
So I had to then take on what I really wanted, because before, you can do that thing about doing my free time, or I need to do this to be practical, whereas like I just don't have that available to me anymore. So
mhm,
just the extreme limited time because of my body,
mhm,
I just had to choose other things. And for me also, what happened when I was very ill is seeing the different people in my life,
mhm,
you know. So I had half of the people who showed up like, are you okay? What do you need? This
mhm,
must be hard for you. And I had the other half who showed up like, you're just being lazy. It's all in your head. This is not that serious, when I'm literally dying on a hospital bed,
mhm.
you
Wow.
know? This is not that serious. It's all in your head, or even
Mhm,
weeks later, like, oh, you didn't do this for me. You didn't do that for me. I'm like, I've just come out of the hospital with a serious illness. And you're like, oh, no, no, no. You just need to forget about this. And what are you doing for me? So for me, it also made me look at certain things you're giving us being important and being like, why?
mhm,
You know? So in terms of friendship, certain friends being like, that saying, when people tell you who they are, believe them. They don't
right.
change. So people who I thought if I am so ill, they would be different were not. They were
Mhm,
as selfish, as demanding,
mhm,
as self-centered,
mhm,
as they did not change. So for me, that was also a real eye-opener in what life do you want to
mhm,
lead? Because for me, a lot of things that I was putting up with, even though I didn't articulate it, but there was something of it, well, because if I'm really down, then they will be there for me. Do you
mhm,
know what I mean? So when I got the experience where it's like, no, 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 they won't. They won't be there. Then it
mhm,
really made me like, so why am I in this relationship or in this friendship? And just really saying that I really was putting up with certain things because I really felt
mhm,
if I needed, they would be there.
mhm,
If I needed, they would be different.
mhm.
So that was also quite critical.
Yeah.
So even though I understand the courage, but I just always try to tell people that it wasn't really, it was just getting to a point of seeing things clearly, and then it became obvious what the choice is.
Mhm,
You know?
mhm.
It just became obvious. So I didn't really need to exert willpower.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Or I didn't have to fight through it. It was
Right.
like, and luckily and happily it turned out, because a lot of these things started out with, I'm going to have to put up with a deficit. Do you know what I mean? I won't be able to live in a certain way, but I'm okay with that because this is more important. But happily, it's turned out differently, or not to be true. So
Mhm,
when I made the decisions, it was definitely because I just can't, and
mhm.
the opposite is just not.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Mhm,
not worth it. Mm,
mhm. Hmm. I thought of you yesterday when I was dancing in the back
okay.
end.
Yeah.
And I thought of dancing is one of my expressions, like, like you described, you know, the drawing as breath. Maybe dancing is breath for me. Um, I dance, or I can dance with every single emotion, grief,
Mm,
joy, desire, all the things. And yesterday, what I was noticing is that I wanted to be outside. I wanted to take in oxygen from the trees instead of being inside. And my body wanted to move, but I was actually tired, like low energetically. And I thought of you because um, one of the things that you've taught me in, being in this sister squad for what, 4 years now,
mhm.
is
Yeah.
that regardless of what our bodies are going through, regardless of what state our bodies are in, regardless of what age or anything that's happening, we can always have access to movement. And there's a way that we can listen to our bodies and honor where we are, what's happening in the moment. But it doesn't mean that, we lose movement. It doesn't mean that we lose that expression. And so you've mentioned the illness that you had and how that impacted your energy. Um, so I'd love for you to share that relationship with movement and your body and, the adjustments that you've had to make depending on what season you were moving through.
So as an artist, as I mentioned, I have different disciplines
Mm-hmm.
or different mediums, let me say. And I always would come up every few years with need to focus. So just pick one, you know. So for the past decades, I've had the loop of trying to pick one and they all just jump back on, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
so so I had an amazing 2007 in the dance world. I was a resident at Dagda Dance Company, which is west of Ireland, which was just an amazing time. Really amazing artists globally coming, giving workshops, it was amazing. Then I moved back to the UK to London, and so I was trying to keep up because with dance or from, I suppose how it is professionally or however you'd like to say, like you do dance class every day, you know, this is 2 hours, it's like really very athletic, very physical, da da da. So when I moved to London, this just was not possible because being a resident artist with a company, you just go for dance class. And I was in Limerick, so it's a small place, whereas in London, it's like having to travel an hour to do a 2 hour class, then an hour back. Like I can't block out 4 hours a day, you know, just for dance class. And for me, all my practice was very physical. So that became, this is not the time. Let me focus on fashion, textiles, you know. Then I became ill. And so I had a few years in that fashion textiles, doing things with my own business, but mainly in that area, that creative aspect, not the other ones. And when I became ill, as I mentioned, my body definitely, there was this, you know, years of things are not right, but then there was that moment of I'm taking over, we're done, not working anymore, you know. Um, and so then that started off years. I mean, I don't even know how many years, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of really like I was bedridden most of the time. And just as I've described before, the level of energy. But the interesting thing with all of that was that the one thing I wanted to do was dance. You know, when I absolutely, according to everything else, could not, you know, like that was the one thing I was always wanting to do. And just before COVID, I was in a group because the work I could do was in terms of textile design because somehow, well, I suppose I'm lying down, so on my laptop, I can come up with designs and things on. So I could do that, you know. And a group I was with when COVID started was like, oh, how do we, it's, you know, global group. I was in Nigeria at the time and got stuck there in a nice way for COVID. And they were like, oh, how do we support each other? This whole thing, you know, but more in terms of mindfulness. It was textile design artists. And one lady was like, oh, she used to be a dancer, and all these like companies are doing dance classes online because once you're with a dance background, even if you're not professional, you tend to still do a lot of classes, you know. So she shared a link for online classes, you know, and I had never been into the online dance class thing. So I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And I was like, it's actually perfect because nobody's seeing me. So I can just do what I can do, you know, because most classes are long, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, which is understandable. If you paid that amount of money and traveled somewhere, you're not going to go for 15 minutes, you know. So that became a gateway to dance and movement again, you know. So I was doing these classes, i.e., watching them as I was lying down, and maybe just if I could do a minute of something like a really simplified movement, you know. So whether it's just hand gesture, you know, or just a slow pointing of toe, but really breaking down the movements to their fundamental and really short sessions.
Yeah.
You know, really, really short, like 10 seconds here, maybe maximum 5 minutes, you know. And for me, that just really allowed me to connect to my body.
Mhm.
Like for me, those moments were just like moments of just connecting with my body, seeing my body, being in my body, very intimate being in and with and connecting to that. And for me, dance always is joy, even if it's in all the different emotions. I think it's joy in the sense of the realness of the moment, you
Mhm.
know, rather than necessarily, haha, nothing is wrong, I'm happy. And so because of that extended period, I was in Nigeria in a very remote place by myself for about 8 months.
Mhm.
Um, and all I was doing every day was waking up and drawing. That was another thing I connected to, drawing for no reason, because I would draw like drawing flowers for the textiles or drawing, planning something, but this one was just drawing. No
Mhm.
aim, no goal, no, and dancing and again, I would use the word dance, even though if you saw me, you'd be like, "Really?" Because I'd just be like laid out on my couch, as in the real,
Mhm.
um, just from a sick body, but
Mhm.
still feeling all that magic of dance. And because my recovery has been a slow process,
Mhm.
a normal process, because it's also interesting with sick bodies how you think one thing will happen, then you wake up the next day and you're
Mhm.
back, whereas it hasn't
Mhm.
been the case over the years, slowly, slowly building it back up. And so again, interacting with movement and dance like that, online has been a blessing for me because then I can really simplify the classes and do what I can do. And in person, there's that thing of you have to do 150%, whereas I'm like 20% is actually really good, as in they're just different experiences.
Mhm.
And just building back up, repeating, and just being in my body and just having that connection and intimacy, as you say, to really be like where I am rather than to project something out.
Yeah.
So if I'm tired, what is that moving and dancing and connecting to that tiredness and expressing it,
Mhm.
versus if I'm energetic, versus if I just want to relax, or versus all the different forms. Social dancing is extremely different, who you're in a group with dancing with also is a different thing, things that I never really appreciated before, but now with this very delicate holding that very delicate thread of dance and movement, just really appreciating the different nuances and
Mhm.
honoring them as they show up when moving, when dancing. Yeah.
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful practice of honoring our beingness.
Mm.
So I'm thinking of the idea when I was probably when I was in college, this is a thing that I would hear. It was a part of my world that you do the thing that makes you money, and then when you retire, you do the thing that you love.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind now, this is insanity
It is.
because I know what it's like to have the experience in my body of doing something that I didn't love, and it felt like a slow death. Not just
Mm-hmm.
death, a slow death. And so I so resonate with you in saying, oh, you didn't use the words, I had no choice, but, as it was living in
Mm-hmm.
my body, like that was the only choice I had. I could have only chosen to do the thing that I loved because doing anything else was so painful.
Mm-hmm.
It was so, so
Mm-hmm.
painful. And so this idea of being in some other way of expressing myself in the world because it's a thing that guaranteed money. It's like, nah, we're just going to have to figure out the money situation some other way because I
Mm-hmm.
have to do what I'm here to do. I have to do this thing that gives me life because nothing else is enough. Nothing else is enough.
Absolutely. That's cool because it's insane advice. And the funny thing is that we know this.
Mm,
We know this. We have so many rich people who basically are despots, And I think everybody says, oh, enough money, even though what everybody really wants is to be happy. But
mm,
we've now shortcut it to, oh, enough money,
mm,
whereas we just have enough experience and enough stories to know that enough money seems to not bring you happiness, but craziness.
mm,
And just treating other people badly or losing your humanity in a certain way, like that is a real issue.
mm,
But I don't think it's the money. I think it's because people don't hold on to joy, and they don't hold like being happy for yourself, like how powerful that is. Because people who are like, oh, what you do, it sounds so hard. And I'm like, it's really not. And it's not because I love it.
Yeah.
Like it's a journey rather than oh, this is a suffering, this is a hardship. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if I've shared that. I probably have. I was doing this workshop. It was a drawing one, or it was with an artist. It was a draw anyway, it was something like that. And so he'd given us homework. I and each of us, the next class got to, it was three classes, the next class got to show what we did and talk about it. And so this woman was like, oh, I then went here and then I couldn't figure that out. Then I tried to do this print and it was so horrible. Then I did it, and at the end of it, she was like, it was heaven. Heaven, And I was like, that is exactly it.
Mm.
I tell you, playing with my nephew when he was younger, I mean, I opened the door and he will throw his toy at my head. If I'm describing our day together, you'd be like, what? He's throwing things, you don't know what's going to happen. But that is the greatest joy for me. And
Mm.
so just like getting used to the idea that real joy, deep joy, happiness isn't that thing of I have nothing to do, I have no worries, everything is perfect. It's not.
Mhm.
And if you start from that point of view, you will often be led astray,
Mhm.
whereas if you just start from that, am I happy?
Mhm.
Who cares if it doesn't look like what happiness or whatever is or the path to,
Mhm.
but in this moment, how am I feeling?
Mhm.
Or the other day I went to mind him and his friends were there and they came, the neighborhood kids, like they all still play on the street, which is really nice. So I was making him breakfast of pancake. Anyway, I ended up like 4 hours on a pancake rotation. Oh, that was the best Saturday I've had in ages. I loved it. But if you describe it to anyone, it's like, what? Those brattish kids. You should have sent them to their parents. But I was like, how can I explain how much joy
Mhm.
that morning was? And I
Mhm.
was just flipping pancakes. Somebody would come in like, oh, is there any more pancakes? Come
Mhm.
in, go. That's all I did for like 4 hours. So just this idea of what joy looks like is how is should be more what does it feel like? And
Mhm.
that's only you, for yourself that can tell. You know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I love that. Only you can tell that for yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know so many people who have all those things that are meant to make you happy, reputation, supposedly money, nice house in certain areas, they're miserable, you know? So, and the funny thing is they may not say it, they definitely don't say it, but
Mhm.
everything about their energy is like, people are not happy.
Yeah.
Everything is limiting, it's tight,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just seeing how though they could make fun of me, but also an enjoyment of what are you doing? Oh, you're always doing something interesting, or what's this, or what happened there? Oh, you always look so free, or so whatever, which they take as having nothing to do. But I'm like, mm-mm. Do you know what I mean? Having
Yeah.
having no worries,
Yeah.
just free, whatever. And it's like, yeah, I'm free because I'm doing what I want to do on my terms.
Right.
But those things are difficult, in a certain light, but they don't feel it because it's aligned with yeah,
Mhm.
with where I want to be and
Mhm.
where the universe wants me to be.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There are two things I'm thinking of, and I know we're getting close to the end. Um, I'm thinking of art as advocacy, whether it's advocacy for the earth, which I know that you've done a number of nature-based environmental projects. Um, I'm also thinking of the project that you've done. It might have been on being a good ancestor,
Oh, yeah.
that's the theme of
Mm-hmm.
it. And there are also some younger folks who I'm connected to, um, who their expression in the world is art. And they haven't stepped out into the world yet, into the version of the world that discourages their expression.
Mm-hmm.
And so they haven't, they're sort of still in the cocoon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, and I wonder if there's anything that you would share with them, or that you're feeling called to share with them, to encourage them to keep expressing themselves in the way that is. innate for them. And this is the other thing that's coming up. Like what's the gift that art brings to the world, if you were to describe that? Because I know, like as someone who dances, I'm not dancing for anyone else. I also
Mm-hmm.
don't perform,
Mm-hmm.
but as someone who um, you know, does storytelling and brings together content like this, I'm doing it because I have to. It's like what wants to be expressed through me. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
also doing it because I'm thinking maybe there's one person who might benefit from it. And you might have, you might remember me saying, I don't know who's listening to my podcast. And you're like, actually, I listen to your
Yes, I
podcast. I'm
do.
like, oh, like I see the number of downloads and I'm like, it's probably just me clicking the button over. It's bots. So
Mhm,
you've definitely
mhm.
helped me to keep going because I'm like, nobody's listening. So
Well,
with all of that, I'll just leave that to say, yeah, as we near the end, we're not at the end yet, or we don't have to be, but is there anything that you'd like to share around the gift that art or artists bring, using art as advocacy, or something to just encourage the younger artists coming up to keep going, keep doing their thing?
yeah, I mean, I would say, first of all, in terms of advocacy, the word that was coming up for me in where I am is reconnection. So art, creativity as a point of reconnection. Because I think a lot of advocacy, as you mentioned, quite a few of my projects have that element, whether it's for nature, looking at the climate, but for me, in terms of how disconnected we are from nature, that's led to this crisis. And just also various communities, how you can look at yourself with different eyes, because you can look at yourself with the lens of however you want to call it, traditional values, capitalist, what you can look at yourself through that eyes. But if you look at yourself through the eyes, and I think it's nature, but I think a lot of artists and creatives do that. If you look at yourself through that lens, to that world, you will have very different conclusions and you'll see yourself very differently. So for me, advocacy, for me, because of course it's a huge field and each person has a different point of what they have to give and what they experience, is definitely about reconnection to nature in everything, because I think it's that disconnect and how we've set up these systems that are actually very strange, because I think we came from nature. And yesterday I heard something which I loved, as she was kind of like, nature made our bodies, nature made our minds, nature makes our destiny. So if there's a problem, that's who you go to. You don't go to, whoever guru or whatever. They can share their experience. But in actual fact, if you want an answer or if you want the right perspective, you need to go to nature because that's what has set everything and controls everything. And so for me, advocacy is about reconnection to nature, and reconnection is an individual thing. We can do it together, but you can't do it for someone else, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of for artists, I'm going to say not only young people, even though I'm holding space for these particular young people that you're talking about, just because of my experience with dance and that everybody says, or there is this thing about youth and creativity. Whereas I'm like, the only reason why I feel that has come about is because you haven't been, as you put it, you're still in your cocoon. And the younger you are, the less people bother to hammer in, all those supposed truths, so that's why they can still be there. But in actual fact, age doesn't matter. What matters is time. So for a lot of people, they hate to say it, but I'm like, it's very practical. Just practice and keep doing it. And for me, that's almost just, be in the studio or on your couch, however it is you connect to your creativity and trust your own method. Like really trust it because you want to do it. Once you're an artist or once you're creative, it's like, as you said, you don't perform. Nobody's watching you. No one is holding a stick to you to do it. So there's something about anything you're passionate with is you don't need to worry about motivation or going wrong because there's something in that that's self-generating and
Mhm.
self like moving you along. So
Mhm.
just trust that and really for me prioritize that
Yeah.
your space for making work, thinking about work, or nourishing your artist self so that you can make work, you
Mhm.
know, and that's what it's all about. So whenever anyone comes to me, and I want to really say that it's associated with youth because you haven't been indoctrinated, but I'll say anyone who's starting on a creative journey. So no matter what your age is really trust that you are yourself everything,
Yeah.
so trust what you want to do. If it's go for long walks, if it's sit on the couch and do nothing, it's all part of or supposedly do nothing, it's all part of the process. So really trust yourself and jump into it
Mhm.
rather than trying to move it somewhere, whether it's to be smart to make money or to be smart to do something or to be smart because just leave all of that out. So whenever anyone comes to me and they're like, oh, they know a young person who's creative but wants to go into fashion, I'm like, the first thing I say to them is just direct them to me. Don't give them any advice because people
Mhm.
love to give advice. And just the
Mhm.
practical thing is someone who doesn't do it doesn't know.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter how much they care about you. If they're not an artist or a creative person, if they haven't made it their profession, they
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
So even if it's that they said it didn't work out, they still don't know.
Mhm.
So don't put your story because a lot of people will listen to people who love them and care about them, advise them, but they don't know because the art world is extremely lucrative. There's a lot of money in it. So this idea that you can't make money is not because there's no money in the art world,
Mhm.
So that's the second, just practical things, because I think on a creative level, if you really just trust yourself,
Mhm.
um, like really, as absurd as some of the things may be, like weeks of just watching some crappy show.
Mhm.
Sometimes that's just what you need, So for me, I just check in with myself. Is this what I should be doing now? And really trusting it and letting things unfold rather than, that whole thing. Oh, I'm doing nothing. I need to motivate myself. This isn't looking good.
Mhm.
Just really allow yourself to roll with it. And for young people or young creatives, people who are just starting out, regardless the age, I'll say also it's a sacred space.
Mhm.
You are your protector as an artist, you
Yeah.
know? And so what I find is people do things like show everyone their sketchbooks, whereas it's like, don't do that. That's like a diary. Of
Mhm.
course, in time you will learn that naturally. That's why sometimes I'm like, as long as you just really trust yourself, all these things come and you don't really lose much. But that's one thing I also say. It's a sacred space. You don't need to show everyone. So this whole thing that you need to, you don't need to. I have like 6 posts on my Instagram, and that's I don't know how many years old. I'm getting work, I'm working. So just be very, if like, don't push yourself to be visible or think that you have to. And there's sometimes when you really don't want to show anyone anything. That's just the period.
Mhm.
When you want to, you will want to, if that makes sense. You don't need to push through or push yourself or because that is a stage in making work. And I found that if you skimp on it, that's what leads to things like burnout, not feeling as creative, and just extended periods of dissatisfaction with work.
Mhm.
So those are my own personal experiences if they're helpful. But the
Yeah.
main one is trust yourself as an artist. It's not going to look like any other person's
Mhm.
daily schedule,
Mhm.
process, etc. Really allow yourself to follow your journey. Let it play out fully, without cutting it or trying to polish it or finish
Yeah.
it.
Like really trusting it
Yeah,
for
and
what
really
you're being
following it,
called
like
to.
trusting
Right.
it,
Yeah.
living it,
Mhm.
letting it be what it is.
Mhm. Even if
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense on a logical level, there's some
Mm-hmm.
wisdom to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And itself, what's the word? Like it's a journey. So once you have that passion, it is moving. You don't need to move it. It
Right.
doesn't stay still.
Right.
As I say, if you need motivation, I feel like it usually means you don't want to do the thing. Because when you want to do something, you don't need any motivation.
This is
It's
true.
its own engine,
Yeah.
So that's why you don't need to worry if you're going on what seems like a la-la path. It's moving and it's
Mhm.
moving in the right direction. It can't do but otherwise, you
It's an
know?
artist's way. It's not linear.
Yeah, and I love what someone said in that also part of being an artist because everybody knows, well, I hope everyone knows, but one of the key points of art is your unique point of view.
Mhm.
And that also comes with your unique way of doing things. Even on the day-to-day practical studio arrangement, you will also have your unique way of doing things. So trust it, you know? Yeah.
Mm, thank you for that. So this is perhaps the final question that's coming to mind. So I'm thinking of many of the people who listen to the podcast and they've gone through some painful experience around loss, um, fertility, their body, and they might not name it as such, but really some expression of art is a part of their medicine.
Mm,
So Bridget, who was on a previous episode, she read two poems that she
mm,
wrote, and I just so enjoyed that.
mm,
Um, there are other people who I've worked with who did baking as a way of just like expressing themselves and their soul. Other people have done, I'm trying to remember this form of art. Can't remember what it's called, but it's like drawing these lines and these like beautiful patterns that come from that.
mm,
And I did a session with her. That's how I met her and learned about her journey. Um, Other people do writing. I do singing as a form of grieving and just releasing. I'm remembering being in the hospital with Mateo, my son, who made his
mm,
transition in the NICU, and it's like the world was falling apart and all I wanted to do was dance. I wasn't like celebrating, but my body just needed to
mm,
move. So, yeah, I recognize the ways that having these, I call them soul expressions, or that's the term that's coming up. These
mhm,
expressions of our soul, regardless of what we've been taught in school, or regardless of
mhm,
how we've been trained in society about what's acceptable and what isn't, and what's appropriate and what isn't, the ways that these are medicine for us. And so anything that's coming up for you, I'd love for you to share on that point.
Yeah, I mean, you put it so well. I was like, yeah. Yeah, because I'm not a social dancer in
Mm.
terms of I rarely dance to have fun, even though I do. But that might be once every 2 years where an idea of clubbing or just dancing like that comes up, but rarely. So I often want to dance or dance is about other things, um, because dance, at least in Western society, is often associated with things like laziness, not serious-minded, not having anything to do, being frivolous, all these things that are, I will say, a light expression. So the idea that you can dance out of grief, or like those are concepts that's like, what? Do you know what I mean? Like the association with dance is often either frivolous or this very particular performance-based athletic feats of, look what I can do with my body, superhuman stretch. So for me, even though dance is joy, it's more like joy at really seeing something or really being in a moment rather than joy, like I'm just laughing and there's no problems and everything in my life is perfect. And for me, I think there is something, I keep saying primordial about art. Someone pointed out, which I'd never thought about, um, is that those are expressions we had before everything else. So now it's really funny when people are like, oh, art, dance, these things are like privileges, etc. And it's like, we have been doing this before, like anything, before we had electricity, before we had towns, before like dance, art was such a rich part of the day-to-day expression and movement. And I really think we need to try and call those times back and really think why, really think why. And so when you talk about art today or creative energy, walking, living, being creative, again, I just think for me, I just keep saying, for me, my expression, my experience is just that reconnection because it reconnects you to reality, actually, you know? reality on a primordial level, what nature is, what that essence of what it means to be human is, you know, so those expressions. And I think part of the reason why it does that is because you have to be in the moment
Mm,
and it has to be you, you know?
mm,
So those 2 points that are actually critical in art, I think that's the reason why it's so healing. And that's the reason why it becomes the form that people can go to get this experience because you have to be like you have to show up as yourself. There's
mm,
no faking it, you know, and just that reconnection. And that's the space because then you're really seeing. And once your eyes are open, as they say, once you see something, you can't unsee. So once you're in a space where your eyes are open, you
mm,
know, there's just something about being in that space that even when it's tough, it's real. And that's joy. And you don't want anything else. The more you do it, you know, the more it's like you're less willing to have
mm,
make other compromises in terms of that. So that's why I think art, being creative and connecting to your creativity is really healing, you
mm,
know, is really healing and is so, and it's just beauty, just also that concept of beauty is actually food.
mm.
It's air. We need it. It's not. I mean, look at nature. That's why it's so amazing. I find when people are like certain countries, like, oh, they're so poor, they don't have electricity. I'm like, do you see their landscape? They have unspoiled nature, which all these rich people jet out to experience. That's their every day. That's what they're looking out.
Yeah.
Their mud hut or whatever, you know, like this intense beauty. So that's another reason why I think art is so important because it connects us,
Mm,
you know, to real beauty, not fashion standards, which I'm always like, I hate that it's called the beauty industry because it has nothing to do with beauty
mm.
and just everything to do with fitting in, you know,
Yeah.
or that system that tries
Yeah.
to control you by setting standards, but it's
Right.
not beauty.
Yeah.
It's not beauty. So that's another thing with creativity is that it's real beauty and
Mm,
that's like food for us. So we're being nourished
mm,
when we're there, you know,
mm,
just feeding on that energy of beauty.
mm,
Mm.
mm. Thank you for that. I'm just like drinking that in like cool, cool water. Just like, cool, cool water. Wow. Thank you.
Mm,
Mm,
mm. You know, but I'd also like to say, like, I think a lot of people, when they express something about wishing for art or creativity, or like, oh, I'm not creative, and
mm,
these sort of things, they always do that thing where they attach it to a skill.
mm,
I can't draw, I can't do this, whereas I wish people would also experiment to attaching it to those other things, like being in the moment,
mm.
sitting with beauty, you know, and
Yeah.
expressing whatever it is, you
Mm,
know, and stop focusing on the outcome,
mm.
you know,
Yeah.
and just being in that moment. And
Mm,
so it doesn't matter whether you can't draw, you can't sing, or
mm,
all these other things. It's the
mm,
doing it, it's the process that actually
mm.
the magic lies in, you know, and
Yeah.
really being in that process and letting it unfold.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but it's fun, you know?
What do you know? Life can be fun after all.
You know? You
It's
know?
interesting how we're taught to rough and tough.
Yeah. Even though I have to say, if you see me in my studio, I am usually like, I'm making all sorts of noises and faces. So when I was working, doing some embroidery, because I was learning a new technique a couple of weeks ago, and one lady was like, oh, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm like, this is my happy face. These are my happy noises, you know? Like, I know it looks like, but that's figuring it out is like part of the joy, you know, that kind of way. And like, because for me, it's the figuring it out and being in the moment of like, how do I do this? Why is this not looking like this? What do I need? Like, all of that is like just expressions of joy. So I was saying to her, this is my happy face. These are my happy noises, or, you know, parts of it. So, yeah.
Mm. Okay, so the question that's coming to mind is um, what keeps you inspired?
What keeps me inspired? I have to say, what keeps me inspired has been that personally for me has been following the process because I had many years where I was trying to just make the artwork, you know,
Mm,
I literally the pencil paintbrush, drawing the thing, you know. Whereas there's some mornings, I think I've told you about my mornings where it used to frustrate me. Um, I would say I can't do everything in the morning, but what is more accurate is that morning is my dream time. I
Mm.
wake up in the morning, always in the best mood, regardless of what has happened. I'm la-la-lying it. Dare I go for a little walk, can
Mm.
turn into 3 hours, and you see me just la-la-lying everywhere. Like,
Mm.
what is this plant? What is this? Like, this is my morning mood. And so that used to frustrate me because I definitely grew up with parents. I remember my grandfather, when he came to stay with us, he was scandalized by our sleeping.
Mm.
So on the weekend, we'd like sleep in. We're definitely a sleeping fam. Okay, apart from my mom. The children were sleeping. We come, our idea is relaxing together, not doing things together, if that makes sense.
Right.
And so he came and he was like, 5 a.m. is the best time to do things. And my mom is like that as well. You wake up early in the morning, that's when you get things done. Figure, no,
Mm.
nighttime is the time for me. And so I used to have that particular point of frustration, like, no, morning times is when you should get things done, the ba 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 ba. Whereas I'm like, for me, it's la 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 time, you know? I've forgotten my train of thought. I have forgotten my train of thought. What did you ask me?
Inspired. What keeps you inspired?
Oh yeah. So when I allow myself all those, what I would call my woo-woo-ness, I do like that word, or my whims.
Mm.
Like that for me is my nourishment. Anytime in my life when I try to be serious and cut those things out and just get to the serious things, like my creativity flags, my health flags,
Mm.
my happiness flags. But I find that when I really let myself go with my whims, it never lets me down, and that it may seem if I really just let it happen, I still get things done, if that makes sense. But I get them done deeper, happier, and it's like for me a nourishment. Um, and for me, there are definitely flights of fancy. So
Mm.
I let myself, and each year I let myself more because before it's like just morning time, you know, or just this time, or just that each year, because it just works out so well, I get deeper and deeper into it. So I'm at a stage now where literally if I have my what I would like to do, what has to be done for the week, but I let the day unfold how it wants to unfold.
Mhm.
Even though sometimes it can be like, but I need to do this thing in 3 days and I'm still here, I don't know, gathering flowers, something that seems
Mhm.
whimsical, but somehow that's exactly what I need to get done to do other things or just not
Mhm.
and postpone it. So that's what keeps me inspired. Definitely my whims and really following them. Um, yeah. And I say whims because it's not a fixed, like they can be anything, they can really be quite random sometimes. But I just find really honoring that and working with it for me keeps me fresh, and keeps me inspired, keeps me curious,
Mhm.
keeps me healthy.
Mhm.
Mm.
Thank you so much. Anything that you'd like to share? We've come to the end.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's so interesting. Well, it just feels like I'm talking to you because we're always talking like this anyway. But just in terms of the podcast, I think just when you were speaking about the people who could be listening in terms of when you speak about attention, I mean, I was just like, as someone who listens, and who apparently is going through different things, because it's not about pregnancy. I keep saying, oh, well, that whole life is just not on my cards, which is fine. And that I'm in my mid-40s. So it's often like, why do I listen to it? But I just think there is just something about connection to the body. And when you say connection to loss, that just can open up a portal in unexpected ways. So just listening to a space that really allows that opening, and really shares that opening is just so powerful because I mean, I definitely think so. My illness, I still say I don't know what it was, but it was around fibroids, so around my womb, really severe anemia in particular. And I find even in terms of like just so many things to do specifically with the reproductive organs or being female, perceptions of what to be a woman is, etc. So I just find like with this space is interesting with the conversations because I was 30 something, I was past 30, and when it started emerging. And one of the things that shocked me was the number of women around me who'd had hysterectomies. Like, I'm like, how could I know these people? I see them so, and I had no idea, you know? And so for me, just having a space talking about women's bodies, and especially in terms of loss, rather than in terms of the ideal, which is not ideal, you know, because I feel that's the only space that's given for real or well deep or lengthy at least discourse. So it's just interesting having a space where I would say the more loss element or the more grief element around the body or an individual's experience of the female body, you know, it's just really powerful. And I just find it interesting how it opens so many portals. So yes, that link between liberation, um, connection through dance, through art. Like it seems like random things, but actually how critical or how interconnected these things actually are. So yeah, so that's just what I was musing on earlier when I was thinking of the space. Like, oh yeah, it's an interesting one, you know, and just what it brings and thinking of me as a person listening, you know, that's what it opens up for me, just really beautiful, deep, personal experiences. And yes, they all come from, or often come from loss, you know, grief, or disappointment in terms of the female body, but the portals they open to very beautiful things, really interesting. Um, really interesting. And just the tenderness that a lot of us listening hold, you know, and just again, it's just one of those funny things that this is like a bomb, isn't it? Or for me, it always feels like I listen to the podcast when I just need to feel comfort. You know, that's often when I listen to it, when I'm like, I need comfort, I need comfort. But, yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Wow, it feels so good to receive that. It feels so good to receive that. Yeah. To know that it serves as a balm. Yeah.
Definitely.
What I'm holding and appreciating in this moment is, hearing you share about how precious time and energy is to you and that you're intentional about what you say yes to. It's like, oh yeah, like I got in. Abby said yes. So there's that appreciation and celebration. Um, because you could have said no, and you did mention that had it been another day, you could have said no. But you had just listened to the episode with Bridget, and Bridget's
Mhm,
yes then led to your yes. So grateful for the
mhm,
ways that
mhm,
our community shares with each other and inspires each other.
mhm,
And I always have this experience of stepping into new portals when I'm with you. So I love that you mentioned like the portal that the podcast opens up, and
mhm,
the tenderness and the gentleness that's there. Because when I'm in conversation with you, I enter into this world of color and shape and deep analysis, and it's so alive. It's so alive. And so thank you for the different places that you've allowed us to journey together, how I'm leaving feeling inspired. And even as I'm sitting here, I was almost brought to tears. And I was like, should I tell Abby this after I stop the recording? And I'll offer a bit of it now that I'm like, yeah, I am an artist. I
mhm,
am an artist, because in the storytelling, in bringing this together, in essentially like the way that art is living in me now, it's like being inspired. It's like the spirit that wants to come through, the energy that wants to come through, giving it form so someone else can experience it. So I'm like,
mhm,
that's what I do with this, and that's what I want to keep doing. And
mhm.
yeah, that this conversation unlocked that for me. And so, yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, no, you absolutely are. And that's why I'm like, the experience of artist and creativity is so unique to the person, you know? So that's why I'm always like, when people are like, I can't draw, I can't, it's like, that's not,
Mhm.
you know, that's not the best way, I think, to connect to that or to see how your particular if you think most people have a certain element of creativity, but if you're an artist, your expression,
Yeah.
how taking time to really see it and honor it, and nurture it, that this is how it expresses itself. But for me, I'm always like, an artist is someone who makes art, and you just gave it, which I know people find annoying, but you just gave that beautiful description where it is about something coming and you're giving it form
Right.
so that people can see it. For me, that's what making art is, so it's not about, it can be a picture, it can be, an experience, it can be a story, like it just has so many different forms. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Abby. So this has been another episode of the Preparing for Pregnancy After Loss podcast, and I'm here with my dear sister, Abby, and longtime listener of the podcast, which also feels really special. I'm so grateful to have sat with you for, oh wow, almost 2 hours, and just all the different places where we traveled. And yeah, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Natalie. I always love
Alright,
talking to you. So.
So you know where to find me on my website, nataliefacey.com, on Instagram at The Birth Horrors. You can always find me at my email, hello@nataliefacey.com. Thank you all, and we will see you in the next episode.